Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and a continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA didnt Nano project. And since it's been 48 hours since we last talked about the Nintendo 64 core, you know there's been not one but two core updates since then, bringing a ton of games into the playable category and fixing up some graphical bugs in Mario Kart that basically make it a fully complete experience at this point in time. And that's absolutely amazing to see. There was one last visual bug in Mario Kart 64 which has now been resolved, so outside of having the blur filters applied over it, you can 100% play Mario Kart 64 from start to finish on the current core exactly as you would expect it to look like on original hardware. So at least for one game, the core is basically 100% functionality and you love to see it. But this new core brought so much stability and new games to the mix. It is so much fun to see these things happen. But let's move right into Wave Race 64 because this has been improved with the most recent cores. The stability, the speed, the graphics, everything here just seems to be Wave Race 64. And Robert, the core developer, said he had this running over 2 hours on his test system with absolutely no issues or freezing whatsoever. So this is another game that has been improved, and we'll get into the new working games in just a moment. But just seeing this again running on screen, just a mere 3 weeks ago, it was basically a wireframe that would run at like 8 frames per second. And now this is basically indistinguishable compared to real Nintendo 64 hardware outside of that blur. And again, I just think this looks better without the blur. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. It's been a fun debate seeing what people decide. But you'll see here as we run around the course in Wave Race, that dolphin chases us, all the water effects, it just looks absolutely perfect. If I took a freeze frame of this and posted it as a screenshot, there is nobody that would be able to tell whether or not this was on MiSTer or whether it was on real hardware unless they pixel peeped and looked for that blur. Even the fog effects here in this lagoon area, they just look 100% representationally accurate to original hardware. It is so incredible to see, especially when the fog lifts. All of these different diverse effects that make up the visual hardware of Nintendo 64 being incorporated into the core. Now, of course, not every single game is going to perform this well. There's different visual modes and different effects that all of the hardware of the Nintendo 64 can do, but when we take a look at certain games, it really is indistinguishable compared to original hardware. That is where the core is on some titles right now today, and that is just amazing. Running around this track, watching the water undulate, not seeing any of the polygonal mesh underneath it, this is just what you would expect to see if you turned on your Nintendo 64 with an RGB or HDMI mod and just played around with it. It's so fun just to watch this happen in real time until you 100% run into the wall. Now, on the games that everyone keeps asking about, and I keep telling you that it wasn't working, and now it is Ogre Battle 64. I was impressed with how many requests I got for this game, definitely in the top 3 most requested, and I'm happy to tell you today you can get into the game and start playing. But the first thing you need to do is name your character, and if you don't see me on Discord or Twitter, my wife found a kitten outside of her work on Friday. It's got a clean bill of health, and he's living with us in the bathroom currently adjusting, and we have named him Pepsi Man. Well, not really, I'm sure that'll change, but for right now, my character's name is Pepsi Man, and if you're ever wondering what my sword holds, it's pure passion 100%. I just love that question right there. It's such a funny euphemism. Pretty much every pick has something going on with it. But this game definitely takes a long time to get into the actual game, so I did test it throughout the first 10 minutes to make sure you could get into the actual action, and that 100% was working. It is possible that at some point in time it will freeze. It's a very long, elaborate game, so don't quote me and think you're going to be able to finish this, but do test it and leave me a comment down below and tell me what you find for results, because to keep these videos coming out efficiently, I can't test every single game for multiple hours, but at least through the intro and the initial setup for your characters, Ogre Battle 64 is just 100% working, and that's something that everyone was very curious about. It is such a fun game, it's a great Nintendo 64 experience, and it's unlike a lot of the other software in the library, and now with the current core, this game went from freezing on the menu to 100% playable, at least from what I've seen. And the audio quality is spectacular as well, and this game has a spectacular soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, I'll be back with more games that just work. Now moving on to another tactical battle game that has nothing to do with Ogre Battle 64, it is Mario Party 2. A lot of people in the requests were asking to see more Mario Party games, and I'm going to the second one this time. Big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the captures in this video. He was playing Mario Party here, and again, this is just another game that is working. All of the Mario Party games are 100% working on the core. You can get through a round, you can play around. It is just the Mario Party everyone knows and loves, but if you do rub the skin off your palm trying to spin the analog stick around, I am not legally or morally responsible for anything you did to your hand. If you're not aware, that happened back in the day, and Nintendo got in a little bit of trouble for it. But playing this game again, this is where the Mario Party franchise got its start on Nintendo 64, and here on the current core, it is just 100% working, playable, and really enjoyable. This game has such a fun sense of humor, and it's one of the best games you can load up for any sort of game night where you have friends over. It is chaotic, it's hectic, it's sometimes unfair, but that's exactly what you would expect out of a Mario Party title. That's why we love them so much. And if you take a look at all the visuals on the screen, all of the models, all of the textures, I do not see a single thing to my eye that does not look correct outside of obviously anti-aliasing and the blur filter being applied. If you see anything whatsoever, leave me a comment down below and tell me where to look for it, because don't forget, I have to look at this footage so many times, even I do miss stuff, so I always appreciate and love when you guys say you see something, that way I can go back and look at it and make myself a little bit more familiar. But if you want to play Mario Party 2, you can 100% do it today. Just remember, you're probably going to yell at your friends. Now moving into the new games that work category, World Driver Championship here used to freeze on the previous cores, but now you can get into the game itself. You will see there's definitely still some visual issues here. It is not perfect, but it is playable, so it's in the playable category. And this is always considered to be one of the best looking games on the Nintendo 64 as far as graphical power and visuals are concerned, and you can 100% see why that would be here. It is not an easy game. It definitely hews more to the sim side than the arcade racing side, and if you know me, you know I love my arcade racing games, but it's fun to see another game come alive that didn't used to work before. And leave me a comment down below to tell me what you want to see tested next video. Just be aware that stuff like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark still isn't working due to that visual memory paging that has not yet been included in the core itself. I get a lot of requests for GoldenEye. Don't think I'm avoiding it, I just can't play it right now because it doesn't currently work. But you will see that the graphics do some funky things in this game, but the controls, everything else is just here and it's working. The lighting effects, the shadows, that does seem to be representationally accurate of what you would expect on real hardware. Obviously the stuff on the side, the textures coming in and out of existence, and the polygons in these trees here being completely messed up, that is not what it's supposed to be. It kind of looks like if you tilted your cartridge and the cartridge couldn't read half of the data on it. But it is a game that's quite difficult to learn. You hit a wall, you spin out. Feels kind of like Gran Turismo if it was on the Nintendo 64 and not on the PlayStation 1. But it's another game that people kept asking about, and I'm happy to say that on the current core, you can play this game today. You can get some races in, you can get a feel of the game, and you can wait for the next core update that hopefully fixes some of these visual issues, because these updates are coming fast and I'll continue to make videos when they come out, and there is more to show. It's been so much fun to follow the progress and see what's going on with the current core, and it's so much fun to see games come alive that used to just either crash or not boot whatsoever. We're getting to the point now where the large majority of the Nintendo 64 library will at least show something on screen for the core, and that we have a solid handful of games that just feel like you're playing them on original hardware. Everyone thought Nintendo 64 was the impossible core, but we've clearly been seeing that it's very, very possible and keeps getting better almost every 48 hours. But once you get into the end of race results, something weird definitely does happen. Now everyone's been asking to see Yoshi's story, and I've been waiting to see if it becomes more playable, but right now, as of today, this is still the experience you're going to have, but it's a quite interesting one. The menu looks totally fine. You'll see story mode here. You can get into the reveal Lucky Fruit menu, and then you can select your Yoshi and decide whatever character you want. So many different color options. They basically changed nothing in the game though. But when we actually get into the game, we get this super trippy Yoshi's been doing some party drugs look right here. All of these sprites just basically repeat into infinity, almost like you pointed a camera at a CRT television and saw the results on screen live. But the audio is perfect, even if people love or hate the soundtrack for this game. So go ahead and listen to how good Yoshi's story sounds on the Nintendo 64 core, and watch the trippy visuals while you do it. It might not look perfect, but it definitely sounds perfect. That is half the battle, and I do love the visual trippiness as well. It's so much fun to see these aberrations in core development when you see something that wasn't supposed to be there, but I'm sure it will be improved over time. Now, talking about games that have been improved in the last 48 hours, when we showed you Harvest Moon 64 last video, it would basically randomly freeze wherever it felt like. Right around here, the game would freeze in the intro, and you'd have to mash start to get past it. Now with the current core, you can 100% just start playing Harvest Moon 64 and do whatever you want. The intro doesn't freeze, it doesn't randomly freeze in the gameplay, and just like a week ago, the graphics on this, all of the sprites had these really weird colors that were definitely not indicative of what you're seeing right now, and this is just another vast improvement. Some games were playable until they would freeze, and that would happen in the first minute, 5th minute, 10th minute, but it made it basically unplayable if you wanted to make any sort of progress, because don't forget, all forms of saving are in the current core. But now with this newest build, you can just start playing this game. Now do be aware, I always warn you, maybe it'll freeze in an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours, so it might not be completable yet or as completable as a game like Harvest Moon is, but you can get a lot further in the game, and everything here just looks good. All of the character text, all of the sprites, all of the different visual effects, even the polygons that make up the houses and the doghouse there, just look like they should on original hardware. And I don't know how this kid can just pick up a boulder. He must be on the juice, because I've never been able to do that in my life. But all jokes about feats of strength aside, Harvest Moon 64 just had some vast improvements on this core. You can do whatever you want, you can go wherever you want to go, and the game is going to be running stable behind it. And that's kind of how these core updates happen. Something that was freezing 2 days ago is now fully playable. Something that wasn't playable at all 2 days ago now gets in game and you can start playing. And that's the great part about all these update videos and following the progress. You just get to see it in real time. Now moving on to another game that used to work but would freeze randomly, especially between levels, is Hydro Thunder. And I know everybody out there loves this game because it was one of the #1 requests outside of something like Ogre Battle 64. And the good thing is, today this game is much more stable on the current core. Andy D captured this and he saw no freezes whatsoever when he was playing the game. And that's the fun thing. I've tested this in the background and I saw the same thing. In between levels after the race would end, the core would basically freeze up, or sometimes it would freeze in that countdown from 3, 2, 1. Now you can go into any track you want, you can play the game, you can get around the entire course. You might see a little tiny bit of visual glitching in the skybox there. Sometimes things look a little strange, but it's been a minute since I played this on original hardware, so that could have just been in the game in and of itself. But this is just such a fun arcade racing game. It's an absolute blast to play and see work in real time, and it's one of these games that's just so synonymous with the Nintendo 64 and the 90s as far as Midway racing games are concerned, because Midway, Atari, Sega, Namco were all rocking the racing genre so hard back in the day, and Hydro Thunder is one of the best games to come out of this era. And you'll see here we're able to finish a race, put our initials in, and keep playing. But this game's got some interesting sound effects and music as well that sound slightly different than you would expect them to, so go ahead and listen and I'll be right back again.
3, 2, 1, go, go, go!
Just sounds like Hydro Thunder should, and it is a little bit muffled, but it's muffled on original hardware as well. It seems like on some Nintendo 64 games, the audio, the music, everything was maybe a little bit more compressed than other games, so you do get that kind of audio muffling going on there, but it just works. You can finish a race, you can finish all races, and that's all that really matters. Now, keeping in the racing genre, moving back to Beetle Adventure Racing, a lot of people have been asking for a retest of this one, and of course I love all racing games on the Nintendo 64 for the most part, so I definitely wanted to check it out. This game is just working so much better than the last time I saw it. There's more graphics involved, it's running at a better speed with the cache involved in the CPU section of the core, it is just playable. It definitely has some graphical glitches, and depending on what course you're on, you're going to see more or less. But this is such a fun game, and I'm so glad so many people want to see this, because it was one of those games for the longest time I never heard anybody mention whatsoever. And what I really hope is more people discover games they never played on the Nintendo 64 as they start playing around with this core. I've had this game in my collection for over 15 years, and I still play it once a year because it is just a fun, charming racing experience. It feels like San Francisco Rush was combined with California Speed, but they just isolated it to Volkswagen Beetles. And you'll see here as we go over this bridge, if I did another freeze frame, you would just think this is original hardware, but very shortly I'm going to move into a different course, and that's when you're going to see some more visual glitches come in, which I am sure will be fixed in the future, but I want to give you a representation of what the entire core does as far as the different courses are concerned. You will see here on this other course, Coventry Cove, the skybox just basically gets trippy. Doesn't affect the gameplay whatsoever, and if you can't see it, you'd be really hard pressed to know it was there, but it is in the sky, and some of those trees polygons seem to be coming into the course and not looking like trees. But the last time we saw this, there were so many textures missing off the buildings, and it was not running at full speed. Right now, if you want to play Beetle Adventure Racing on the current core, you can pretty much play every single track, see every single race, every single car. It won't freeze, it won't glitch out too much outside of some graphical effects in the skybox and a few trees. It is just such a fun game. Definitely check it out if you have the time. Now everybody keeps asking to see more Goemon, and that makes me very happy because I would say this is the #1 hidden gem on the Nintendo 64. This game rarely gets mentioned, but I've heard more mention of it in the last month and a half than I probably have in the last 10 years. It's such a fun action platformer with light RPG elements in it. It is just so charming, it's so unique, and it's one of those games that 100% reminds me of the Nintendo 64 because I had this game back in the day as a kid. I fell in love with it, and it really was my first introduction to Goemon as a character. Now I don't watch any anime, I just play games, but there's so many good Goemon games out there. Tell me down below what your favorite one is. I would give you an example of the theme song, but unfortunately that always hits a copyright flag, so I can't, but I'm going to give you a sound sample of the soundtrack and some of the in-game play before I tell you what happens once we get to a certain part in the game. But even Giant Robot Goemon here is just an absolute blast. This game has charm for days, and it does have great audio. Listen and I'll be right back. It used to be that the audio didn't sync whatsoever in Goemon, but now it does. There's just a couple cracks and pops and a little bit of whistle in there, but otherwise it's like 95% of what it needs to be. And if you've never played this game before, you're probably wondering what the hell's going on here. It looks like we're in ancient Japan and a UFO just flew over. That's Goemon, it's how it works. It's an absolute blast, and once this is working in the core, I can't recommend it enough. You'll see here the minute we actually get to go loading into the gameplay, we go black screen and we never get the game back, so hopefully that does improve in the future. Now another game that is vastly improved in the playable speed, and it makes me so happy, is Bomberman Hero, because if you haven't heard me mention this in a video yet, it is my favorite game on the Nintendo 64 by far. It's charming, it's unique, it's an awesome platformer, and it has what I think is one of the best soundtracks in all of video gaming history, not just for the Nintendo 64, but of video games ever made. It is just gold to my ears, so I'm going to make you listen to it, of course, because this is my channel. I know you just got an audio sample, but have one more because it's that good. I genuinely do think that Bomberman Hero has one of the best video game soundtracks of all time, but tell me down below which your favorite is, because I would be curious. Everyone has different tastes, but if you want to play Bomberman Hero in the current core, and trust me, I've played this game probably 20 times over the last like 25 years or so, it looks, feels, and sounds exactly like the game on my Nintendo 64. 11 out of 10 recommend. Now I know what you're thinking, why am I showing Commander Keen, a PC game running on the Nintendo 64 core? That's because technically it does run on real Nintendo 64 hardware, but more importantly there was a memory issue that was keeping some games from playing, or some games from playing well, and I'm showing it to you on the screen right now. That's an RSPQ error. That was fixed by Robert recently, and that's why a lot of these new games are working. So it's a little random aside so you can get to see how the sausage is made. Now, a game that everyone wanted to see is Destruction Derby 64. This game wasn't really playable up until I think like a week ago, but even I'm losing track at this point in time. If you want to play the game today, you can see right here, you can 100% do it. And I love the visuals in this game, in this nighttime area here. This gas station that blows up, all of that fake bloom lighting coming from the background. It just has such a vibe going on with it. I love this stage. It's so trippy and unique and really gives me nostalgia for playing the game back in the day. I can't say that this game is 100% pretty on every single stage, but this nighttime stage right here is an absolute blast. And it's one of those things. Everyone seems to remember Twisted Metal, but Destruction Derby not so much. And I love that you can glitch off the wall there and just throw yourself directly back into the arena. But as we move into this stage here, loses a little bit of the charm, but as far as the playability and the current core is concerned, you can check Destruction Derby 64 out. You can get matches in. The controls are good. The visuals are good. I didn't see any freezing whatsoever. It's another game in that playable category. And before you ask if you've looked at the spreadsheets or heard me talk about it, perfect games don't yet exist. They won't exist until the very near end of the core, but some of the games in the playable category seem near perfect, and the sound on this one definitely hits that category. One more listen and I'll be right back. Sounds pretty good to my ears, but tell me down below. But again, if you want to request another game to test in the next video, just leave me that comment and I will definitely check it out, because we're definitely going to be revisiting some games we haven't seen in a while. And speaking of games we haven't seen in a while that have seen some improvements, this is the current core. Obviously it's Super Mario 64, but we're in Jolly Roger Bay, and it was just like 2 weeks ago in which you couldn't see anything here whatsoever. It was basically like going into a black void. But now we can get underneath the water, we can swim down, and we can see so much more of the level. And this is the thing about the current core. There's so many awesome games that so many people remember playing, but seeing Super Mario 64 run this well is kind of the magic moment to my eyes. I remember the previews for this game back in the day. I remember getting a Nintendo 64 for Christmas, and I remember seeing Super Mario 64 in front of my eyes on that television. It felt nothing short of magic. This didn't seem like hardware or graphics we were supposed to be getting in a home environment, but yet there Mario was running around in this game, and it was just mind-blowing. And I get the same sensation on testing these cores. It feels like rediscovering a game for the first time. The only thing I couldn't remember was the order of the chests. I was so close to memory, but of course I picked at the wrong last moment, and Mario gets his little shock there. But just like a Pavlovian response in dogs, Mario learns from electricity and knows what to do the next time. And you will see as the star pops out of the chest here, we can collect it and continue to move on throughout the game. But it's just amazing that we've come this far, this quickly. Robert has done a spectacular job on a core that was considered impossible, and there's even more games I have captures for I'll be showing you in the next video, because I can't make this thing 40 minutes long on a Saturday. But as usual, new core, new games, new visual improvements, new stability have all come to the Nintendo 64 core on MiSTer, and I can't wait to see what the next core update brings. I just hope it's not tomorrow. You'll at least give me Sunday off this week, or else I'll do a 7-day hat trick of new videos in the evenings. Short of that, leave me a comment down below. Tell me how your weekend's going. Tell me what game you want to see next, but I'm going to get back to my weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.